Okay, so this is the pickup video like 15 seconds later. I just ran out of time and this particular camera only does about 23 minutes. And I was going through how the kind of information that you get from the books, from your buddy Jim Bob, and from an internet forum must be really winnowed through carefully. Because 90% of it is somebody's guess, and they live in this warm fuzzy world where they just keep, I call them the corner cutters. Up here in logging country, I grew up with kids that would drive the logging roads, the back roads, and then come into a blind corner and they would carve it on the inside, and if they met a log truck they would die. But most of the time they got away with it. Unfortunately, a couple of them did meet log trucks or other cars and went over the edge. But it's a bad, I wouldn't ride with them. I said, screw you guys, you don't even know how to be safe. Well, I don't want to ride the outside edge, I might get pushed right up. Well, sorry, but that's not logical. I will not live in a world where illogical decisions are made. I've been calling BS on that forever and ever and ever. So when I come to designing a cartridge case, working with powders that are so far out of the envelope, finding the powders that work, doing the job that the reloading manuals do, I have to be at a place where I can do that. I keep saying where I can do it safely. More than that, safety is one thing, but I don't do things safe. I run them right up to the ragged edge. This case is destroyed. This case will no longer go into my priming tool because I expanded it too big. There's a sign of case head expansion. I've got to line up those milled slots that filed slots that I did to get that last primer in there. I had to file off both sides of this so that I could even get it into. I'm going to change that focus a little bit better here and work in a different place in the foreground. So I got it in, and I got a primer in it, and I could see the primer in it again one last time. No, this one's gone beyond being able to seat one more. Oops, I must have missed my slot. I got to turn until, there it is. What have I got here? Come on, baby. There we go. We got a primer in her. But it just fell back out. I heard it clatter. We got a primer in her, but there's no, it's lost its ability to hold. Now that happens, told you, there's a primer in there. I'll take my ubiquitous depriming tool here and show you that it's in there very softly. It won't fall out, I actually bumped it. But when I take this tool and I run it in, it falls out. Offers no resistance at all. I state that a case head this size, you can go up to 2/1000ths of case head expansion. And whether you measure in the groove, sometimes the groove, because it's a machine surface, is slightly more accurate a way to measure, and I'm just using calipers. There's people that get all crazy about knife-edged mics and accurate, and they talk about literally under a half a thou of case. They're so full of it that I don't even know where to go with it. In simple fact, you can barely feel the difference between brand new cases and 1/1000ths of case head expansion, which is well above one of the numbers I just saw recently where some guy came on there and shook his finger at the whole crowd and said 0.0008 is the limit of case head, and he acted like he really knew what he was talking about. The sick thing is, the first thing that happens is it leads people to believe that they can actually measure 0.8 of a thousandth. Bullshit! It's as dangerous as these hunting shows that tell you that you can go out and buy a factory something, I won't put names on it, and go shoot an elk at 750 yards or 1100 yards or 1500 yards on an unmodified factory rifle. Or do it with factory ammo. Or there's so many things wrong with it. Well, this falls into that same. It leads people to do unethical things, which is where my problem is, because they do these unethical things in a spirit of ignorance. When it comes to reloading, over and above and beyond the but ignorance portion of it is the fact that there is a safety issue here. You can hurt yourself this way, people. You can hurt yourself if you don't understand why. If you don't have the magic glasses. If you don't... And it's not. It's simply finding out how to get, how to gain, how to access good information, and then knowing how to go out and test it. Once you can test it, you're home free. Now you can say, okay, my guess was 15 grains of clays is going to be a starting point. You put it in, it tests out fine. The chronograph shows that it's at 720 feet per second, and your ceiling is 1500, except with this powder, it might be not 1500. See, some of these there's powders up here in the high end that'll push a 650 grain bullet out of this case up to 2800 feet per second. Here in the middle, they won't get that hot before they pressure out and wreck the case. But these are all supersonic velocities. I don't even care about them. Down in here, I'm working up, there's a line right here where it says too hot. Somewhere in here, depends on the day, depends on, see the funny, we're chasing a moving target here. The speed of sound is a moving target. So I don't know until I can go out and shoot these through and silence them and check them for actual day-to-day. So I say 1,020, 1,050. There's going to be days I can go up to 1,100. But these are all speculation. The point is that I need to take these hot powders and start going up and see, am I going to wreck brass before I even hit my 1,000 feet per second? And the answer is that in some of the cases with the 1,000 grainers, the answer is indubitably yes. These cases are, I've got test marks on them. These are for some high-end tests we won't be talking about for months in your life. Because, I mean, I'll be doing it in weeks of testing coming up. But these are a mid-range powder. I think these are loaded with H322. But again, I'm really chary about sharing any kind of loading on what I'm sharing with you is not loading numbers, because in a case like this, if I said, hey, go build one of these and hey, use this powder, you could hurt yourself if you don't know how to think and observe and know what the pressure signs are. Once you do, and I'll use everybody, I get people say, well, yeah, but I'm scared, but you make it sound like, but I don't know, but I don't dare. I would never do anything like that where the learning curve could get you killed. And I said, oh, really? So you don't drive? Well, yeah, I'm Class A and I drive 18-wheel. Oh, so okay. Should your kid go drive your 18-wheeler? Or your hopped up dirt bike? No, there's a learning curve, but don't shy away from the learning curve because you think it's dangerous. No. Learn appropriate to what you're doing. You step into a ring with an MMA fighter and you're going to get dead. You step into a ring with Mike Tyson. I realize that he's ancient history, but he is still around, and I'm talking to old people for the most part. Sorry if there's little millennials watching, you don't know who Mike Tyson is. The point is, people that go in, this is Mike Tyson league stuff. Something busts, you're going to get hurt. But there's no reason for it to bust. Learn the rules. You can drive down the road safely. Most of you that are adults, I mean, if there's kids watching this, then learn to drive down the road safely and understand this is the same thing. This road is the same thing. What I'm doing is giving you the tools to learn how to drive safely. If we thought too long and hard about teaching kids to drive, and then we start thinking about sharp corners and driving in the dark and icy roads and cats and rats and bats and stuff jumping out and scaring the kid and spiders dropping off the mirror and crawling down her shirt and she drives through the intersection, and we could paralyze ourselves with fear about driving down the road, but yet people drive down the road all day. So this is safer on all levels than driving down the road, because we need to understand that the limit, the upper limit, is and will always be loose primer pockets. That's where you stop and back way back down. You need to be shooting a load that will shoot 40 reloads or 20 reloads without the primer pocket loosening up. That's a stable max load. All the other pressure signs are subject to all sorts of acky. This particular one, before this thing lost a primer pocket, in this little wimpy small tenioned action that I'm using it in, it actually had to, when it expanded the case head enough, that's not what locked it in the chamber. Because this is way oversized here. This doesn't stick in the chamber. No, what happened is, and I had a tablet here, I'm going to have to draw you a picture. I exceeded two limits, or I exceeded a limit before the primer pocket opened up. This is the primer pocket, flash hole, the diameter of the case, and outside of that and closely adhering to it is the diameter of the chamber in the barrel, and then the barrel of course is much bigger. It's out here, but in this case it's not hugely bigger because this tenyon measures less than an inch at the root. So, I could write it, but I'm not going to. The pressure got high enough that this case expanded radially, which they always do, and this is way up beyond usable range. In useful range, I can fire one of these cases. This case, for instance, right here, has been fired many, many, many times. I'm going to quit putting numbers on it because I don't know, but all of these cases have been fired many, many, many times. I'll take 3 cases and I'll run them through the paces for 100 shots. Never resize them, never do anything to them. I don't even know how many times. This is 3 sets of 3 cases that I'm using for testing now, and I just fire them and fire them and fire week after week, and I don't ever touch them. I don't even resize the necks because they're fitted necks. But when the pressure gets so high that it expands this tenyon of the barrel, the steel expands. As the pressure falls, the case collapses back, and at this high a pressure, it'll lose a little bit of its spring back. Typically, the legend is that they collapse back a thou, and that's accurate. This one got hammered hard enough that it probably only collapsed back a half a thou or 3/4 of a thou. But the problem is that to get up there, it actually expanded this tenyon, and the tenyon chased it back down. So normally the case just expands inside the chamber and pops back. Well, this one expanded, and then it got the chamber to spring a little wider. And so when the brass collapsed back, the chamber followed it down. We exceeded the flex limit on the tenyon. So this case was stuck in there, and I'm a lazy piece of crap, so I just yanked on it. Because, I mean, the one thing you got to worry about, speaking of safety, is when you're yanking a stuck case out, when you're doing this, be careful, because your little pinky fingernail will hook something on the scope, or something. Normally it's on the bottom side of the scope, and you'll lay a bloody flap. So what I do is I put pressure on, then I get my other hand around, and I get things out of the way, and then I pulled on this case hard enough that it split. I've never seen this before. It might have been a flaw in the extractor, but it tore the extractor tooth and split the Savage sliding extractor right in half. Luckily I have more, so I'll just pop one back in there. I had a guy a while back that blew his extract. 2 people that have blown their extractors out, and so I ordered a few spares. Now they're going to come in handy. But those are the 2 things. That's the mechanism. This thing expanded so big that it actually stuck. All the rest of these cases I can shoot over and over and they don't stick at all. And the case head expanded 3 thousandths, which just allows the primer to fall right out. This is a brand new primer. I can put it in there, right side up, upside down. It won't even stay there. Was that dangerous? Absolutely not. It's not dangerous to run up until the primer pocket expands, until case head expansion. That's how you find your max load. Right on TV in front of God and everybody, I once opened one of these up to 18 or 20 thou on a 6 ppc on the camera in the other room. I expanded one of these so wide that you could drop a primer in there sideways. It was a small rifle primer in a ppc. You could put a large rifle primer in it. But was it dangerous? No. We were still well within. The only danger involved there is I happened to have probably had a jewel trigger on that gun. And no, that one didn't even blank the primer. Come to think of it, it expanded, but it didn't even blank the primer. A lot of times when the primer blanks, that little disc goes flying back into your bolt and recocks the gun so stinking hard it breaks a jewel trigger. Oddly enough, in this whole odyssey, this whole YouTube video from start to finish, I have never blanked a primer. I've been waiting for it to happen so I could explain and show you the mechanism of blanking a primer, but in this video series it's never happened. I have yet to blank one, even though I blew up that PPC primer pocket on camera, and it was a good one. I mean, it opened up, this one's opened up enough that you can visually see that it won't hold a primer, but you can't visually see any size. It didn't leak. There's no soot on this. It got a good clean shot off. But I wanted to show you that no matter what shape the case is, no matter what, you can pressure up. I actually fire form a lot of cases to shape. This I don't know if I could fire form because there's not a powder that's hot enough to go in there, even if I put a big wad of clay. So these I fire form with a bullet, but in many cases I fire form without a bullet. And on a bottlenecked case, there's enough restriction up here that I can just dump a certain amount of hot powder in there and plug the end with a paper towel and pop out a case without ever wasting a bullet. You can't do that with this case shape. And incidentally, that's the only thing, the only effect that case shape has on anything. There's always talk on the inner tube about case efficiency. Everybody in the world knows that the 308 is a more efficient case than the 30-06, as well as being more accurate. Well, both statements are total bullshit. But in the real empirical world, a lot of times that's the effect people have observed, therefore they draw erroneous conclusions because they don't understand the mechanism. That's the same thing as talking about headspace and saying, oh, if my headspace gets too long or if I size too far, I might blow my gun up. No! All that will ever happen with headspace, I had to fight to get some of these to fire, some of these little shorties that I couldn't get to headspace on here. Some of these I had to try 2 or 3 times with different bullets to get the first initial bullet to lock up tight enough that it would hold enough. And in that case, I got these flattened primer scenarios because when the firing pin hit it and pushed it forward, because the bullet could not hold it, then it would fire. I could get it to fire. One of these two here that got the flattened primers, it took 3 or 4 tries to get it to fire. It just kept pushing in and not firing, and I'd waste a primer and push it in, and which wasting a primer is not normally a thing, but in today's screwed up Democrat world, even primers are dear. So, long story short is, it took me a while to get some of these to fire because it kept pushing out of the way. That's all that happens if you have excess headspace, is it pushes out of the way. And it won't fire sometimes. And then in this case it fired, the primer popped out, and then it slammed back and mashed the primer into the hole. Watch the other episode to see how that works. But there I was trying to manufacture enough, get rid of enough headspace to just get the thing to fire. But regarding the shape of the cases, I was going to touch on that a little bit. When the 300 WSM came out, the phrase was coined, short and fat is where it's at, and the whole world believed to the bottom of their collective cores that somehow the 300 WSM was magical, that it was more efficient than the 300 Win Mag and way more efficient than the 30-06 and blah and blah and blah. All of those things are untrue. I grew up in a world where all the old farts knew that the bigger a shoulder you put on the cartridge case, the harder it kicked. Now empirically what they found out was that a 7mm mag kicks harder than they expected it to, or a 300 Win Mag. And so they connected it with the shoulder, and they had some of them even had a, I mean, I don't want to go into other people's rednecked explanations. In simple fact, the only reason you neck a case down is so that it will hold a bullet, a projectile, of appropriate size. That's it. To push this bullet correctly, you have to put 250 grains of capacity behind it to drive it in a 50 BMG, and you neck that big case down to hold this bullet. This is another way to drive these big bullets. But the size of that shoulder is no more or less efficient. The only thing efficiency-wise that matters is that I would, and will probably someday, take one of these and blow it out to something I can maintain better, so that my cases last longer. This case won't last more than, I'm getting 20 firings out of them, but I'm good at it. Really, really, beyond belief, good at sizing and making resizing stuff. And it takes a very scrupulous fittage to get a crap case like this with lots of body taper and I don't know, 28 degree or something shoulder looks like. It's really hard not to get this shoulder to slip and stretch forward and cause case head separations back here. That's all covered in other videos. But anything you've ever heard about case shape being better, take it with a grain of salt, because they're not better as far as pushing a bullet. They're not more accurate, let's put it this way. This here thing is going to, in the end, if I can get the gun to handle it, it'll be just as accurate as anything else. It has nothing to do with case shape. So case shape has no effect on efficiency or accuracy, because efficiency is a definable term and accuracy is a definable term. And I'm not going to argue with this, because I also live in a world where 90% of the people I know have trucks, and 50% of the people that I know with trucks have chipped trucks, and they will argue, they'll hit you across the face if you try to tell them that that chip did not make their truck more efficient. They know it made it more efficient. The reason is they don't have a freaking clue what efficient means, or efficiency means, or efficiency is. So they live in a world of guesswork, which is what I'm trying to avoid here. Trying to keep extraneous things like case shape from affecting what's going on. This case will build pressure just as big and bad and hard as any other case shape. This case is wrecked. It's expanded so far this way it hung up in the chamber, and it's expanded so far this way that it will no longer hold a primer, and I very safely established the max for Clay's shotgun powder. This is not a powder that I'm going to be using in this gun, even though it's high up in the burning envelope, and in the interest of ES I want to use faster powders. That one is too fast. That one is too hot. That one is like running up and kicking a bowling ball down the alley. The only thing that gets accomplished is a sore foot.